Chile here with Sirius Dallas Moon. This is Water Expands Upon Cooling Season 3, and this is with the reopening of case for Tair Rada. I want to elaborate. This is more of the theoretical framework chapter of Water Expands Upon Cooling. Why don't we have a name for murderer for Tair Rada? And the reason is very simple. It's called egregore. When we talk about sharing bodies, personalities, consciousnesses in a disorganized way as a result of rituals done as part of occult rituals or as egregores, unfortunately, because of the nature of those rituals, which is unfortunately very abusive, then it affects, first of all, it affects infants, it affects things and people around, like it affects fabrics of time. Another thing is that the consciousnesses are going to be decentralized. It's not a one person running the thing. Just like when I said Tair Rada was trafficked in a hidden way, I did not necessarily mean she was physically being trafficked, but I mean that her body and her consciousness took part in something ethereal, something astral, something non-volitional. Now, the murderer also was compartmentalized consciousnesses within a body. That's why we don't have a name. Sedna. In fact, the whole thing of how these things are done was meant, and I give you points of reference again, interview for Douglas McIntyre. This is also how come murderer, accused in murder, Zadorov could have been given details where he could have had some sort of ritual done on him where he would confess to things he didn't do and again, it's a possibility. The point was to make these things vague, to make these things unclear, to make it impossible for accountability to be held, but it exposes an underlying structure. It exposes an egregore that was achieved by violation. Saturn's hour. I'm gonna call him Dana Balgadi. Moon Aldebaran. Beta per se. Ascendant was crossing Beta per se. Venus applying to oppose Neptune. Well, not gonna air it right now, but this is why also we don't have name for murderer, and why so many, and it could have been that all of these consciousness were involved because of these rituals, but somebody is abused, but somebody is violated, then they can be dissociation, and then their consciousness is not totally within their body. Okay, so when we talk about the epistemic and the ontological unit called human being, or in that case called murderer, then it's becoming beyond obvious, okay, that was the point. And this is how the accountability is being reduced, but it's not artificially reduced. Pluto is about to go into degree 3. We ingress back into degree 3. And then when people want to hold something accountable, it's a structure that generates these egregores. What is behind those banking companies, energy companies, decentralized conglomerates ruling over pyramidal structures? Sorry, not now, not now. Um, yeah. I cannot give you a clearer picture regarding cold case Tair Rada. In fact, there isn't. That's the truth. When Feynman talked about the photoelectric effect, he said, when he was asked about probability with quantum, he said, I cannot make the truth different. This is the truth. This is the true how and who killed the Tair Rada. I cannot make the truth different. It's complicated. It's complicated. It challenges every single notion of juristic procedure and forensic evidence. Good morning. It's about fucking time. At least a century. That's how these things are done. Two 2006 was around again, the jurisdiction for Epstein. Each and every person on Epstein list and their victims and survivors is affected by what I just described. I cannot make it more simple. So, This is also why those such cases took time, and why solution is not what we would expect it to be. People want a name. Just like with the Epsteins, they wanted a name list. And how many times did I say they need to take into account the mind control, the effects of dissociation, the activation pattern. Um, so, like I said, when they ask me to tend to a case, I say, I speak the truth. I don't masquerade. I don't make it more simple. I don't pretend that something didn't happen that did. Now people are probably going to ponder about the evidence, the details, okay, but the structure here is the thing that changes everything. And you know me, I always tend to the thing. This is why there was such a pull for me to talk about it. And I'm like, okay, because they know I work differently, attend to these cases differently. Oh, then come on. The cell phone of Tair Rada. I said it reminded me of Cassandra, where they were asking for the pass. Uh, this was 2022. I think I did episode of what the expense upon cooling. Probably that episode I did in 2023, but um, um, may have watched the episode of 2022. Yes, 15 years they got the cell phone. But now, a week ago, and they're involving AI in the um, assessment of the evidence. So this is Roman Zadorov that was accused, set in prison for 15 years, then vindicated for benefit of doubt, and he was receiving highest compensation that was given to a vindicated prisoner. But what are the evidence? I don't know. It doesn't show here. Why was it reopened now? Again, 2006 was around the Epstein, 2015 as well, 2020, 23 before something, and I'm looking at what is this. This is probably before Neptune going back to degree 1. Police are dragging their feet. On reopening murder case reports. This is an unusual thing. No, it's not. It's just got to the news because it was supposed to serve something of it being in the news, very likely. A pivotal media. Again, we had case for Madeleine, we had case for Tair, Rada, right around the Epstein jurisdiction. It's not possible for a state to release someone who was accused of murder, paying compensation, and stand behind this ruling, but leave the murder case unknown as if it doesn't matter who murdered Tair. Again, to address who murdered Tair, they would have to address what I'm talking about, and like everybody know, I usually say they can't say it, but soon enough they'll have to say it, because soon enough it will be impossible to resolve a murder case without it. Okay, I think most murder cases today are already affiliated with that. They have invented something which doesn't exist, a committee to investigate whether to open the case. Again, they can't escape it. Even when they try to escape it, they have to address it. That is global. We are all Tair Rada. There's a 14-year-old girl who was murdered 20 years ago, whose murder case not been solved or even opened. So again, those who are seeking a name, a consciousness, they better be seeking a structure. I think the names are more like MK Ultra, paperclip, whatever operation they were running with children. Book review, who murdered Tair Rada. The police eventually did reopen the case. A week ago. Ola Kurevchenko, again, another person that was accused. Concepts like ritual abuse and their connection to the Epstein occult egregore practice, that was an inverted practice, meaning, as the occult observer talks about, a sacrifice-based practice. So the paradigms are beginning to assemble. Again, people still want the name. The when we talk about such cases, is not one name or one consciousness, if that makes sense. Um, to explain that sozusagen to the wider public, or to admit that, is something that would completely collapse the structure that generated that. And this is why we see the framing as who stabbed Tair, Rada remaining the same, where that framing, that phrasing, that ontology, that epistemology is no longer relevant and never was. So, yeah. And then there was another person named Ola Karavchenko that said that she was going to say there's going to be a mess. Balagan is um, an operation word for Israeli culture. So Balagan is an operational word. It's a word. It's not just a simple word. Um, but this is testimony of somebody who was supposed to be her friend, and then they had some sort of abusive relations where he was threatening to ruin her name because he wanted to imprison her. So he could have been some sort of a trafficker or something. Or maybe he was, I don't know, maybe he was abused by, like, there are many things that can be, but I don't know. Apparently there was abuse in that relationship, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse for years. So this guy, he could have been a handler, but again, he could have been a handler. And he was admitting that he raped Karavchenko. So again, the notion of trying to put somebody else in prison for the crime to somebody is just exactly how those um, lineages work, or um, and then they will look in psychiatrically at this lady that was raped and abused, and they say that she's not able to withstand trial, and then she was forcibly hospitalized, which can create mass shooters at the very least. Okay, for forcible hospitalization is another generation mechanism of offenders. This could take her from being a victim to being basically a mass assassin. Um, then she was hospitalized since 2012, I think, to 2016. November 2015, my Peleg, which was her transgender activist roommate, said that Kravchenko confessed her being violent and the murder of Tair Rada. Um, Again, if she was continuously raped, she could have been violent because it crosses the threshold of dissociation that leads to mind control. It's the generation of offenders. Um, People want to talk about choice, talk about agency, but rape negates agency. That's exactly the meaning of rape. And the roommate, my Peleg, unalived herself a while later, October 2018. Was another girl anonymously claimed Kravchenko confessed for the murder. And again, the confession from the murder could have been a mind control thing, like Ishak Ilan, um, that was secondary to the head of the intelligence, interrogated independently and concluded that Kravchenko committed the murder. Um, he said that a part of the details were given to Zadorov by the investigators, which would literally mean an MK Ultra thing, and that the films were edited. Um, and I didn't understand if Kravchenko eventually unalived herself as well. I remember that. Um, Again, I also remember when I observed it and I said, well, her so-called boyfriend admitted to have raped her, and people just ignore that. I'm like, well, rape generates dissociation, which generates susceptibility to mind control. Mind control can be causing a person to murder somebody because they're dissociated. That's how mass shooters are created, or political assassins are created. DNA 2018 found hairs from the murder scene that were compatible with genetic profile of Adir Khabani. Genetic profile, if a print is not suffice, so genetic profile is. What can I say? I know, but this is science. But again, this Khabani person, is he alive? He wasn't defined as suspect. They said that he was at the time of the murder in Gadot kibbutz, and it was a wig, and then the wig Kravchenko talked about wasn't the same wig. It's kind of like a Halloween wig. experts for mental health. Again, to be an expert for mental health with the Epstein infiltration, one would have to commit a crime that could be, for example, to rape and murder an infant. So that brings a bias to the scientific field of forensic psychiatry. Okay, it's enough to have one infiltrated forensic psychiatrist. Um, they said that she could have had mental issues, but no connection between that or and murderous urges. That's, like I said, it's a different paradigm to the truth. It okay. What is mental issues if she was violated? The sense of self violated. What is sense of self violated? Mars violated. What is that? Is agency. What is also Mars is action. What is also Mars? Permeation, violation, penetration, death, murder, something broken, something stabbing, um, something murderous. Okay, why do people call rape a murder of the soul? Um, Kravchenko litigated um, the creation of the documentary about her, the creators of the documentary about her for Libel. The judge Asher Kola said that there was no infrastructure of evidence for vindicating Kravchenko. Of course, if she was raped, then they cannot vindicate her. It means that she was violated and her sense of self was violated. Meaning she was not being fully agentic in this in at the time of the murder, basically. But here is the thing: this is usually true to the to the murderers. Um, the activator would not be the person at the crime scene. Um, 2007. Yeah. 24 July 2026, they reopened the case. The father of Tair Rada was died of cancer at 2016. Um, I don't know what type of cancer. Okay, so that was the theoretical framework on the what and how, and this is essential. Who is this lady? So what is that? Like, who cares? I mean, it's not in that context. People can care, but it's not as like it's a different topic. Exactly. I didn't mean it to come out like that. It's not about not caring about her. It's just that we're doing a different topic right now. Um, so her mother said nobody spoke with her about reopening the case. Um, she wants the investigation to be reopened. Yeah. Again, they're putting AI to work, so um, let's see what does AI Google says about this. Now, again, without addressing things like egregores, rituals, the philosophy of science to do with these type of practices. Um, Again, watch Douglas McIntyre. He describes exactly the structure. Douglas McIntyre episode by Annika Lucas. Um, and Jupiter, 8 degrees Leo. So, ascendant 7 degrees Gemini. This is, again, completing what are expands upon cooling season 3 at the aftermath of the 30 million files, at the aftermath of what the Epstein files actually mean. What do they actually expose? What are the implications? Um, what are people expecting when they are tending to these cases? Yeah. Again, we're 2 meters before the Leo eclipse. And so